Good morning, friends. It's so good to see you this morning. Happy Sunday. We're going to go over a few announcements before we get started. Before I forget, if you are going camping, Jeff and Noreen put out a flyer by the front door, so grab that on your way out. Or if you're going to forget, go ahead and get up and go get that now and bring it back to your seat. It has some information about camping, and we'll be sure to include that in an email at some point as well. In April, we have a lot going on. One of those things is deacon nominations. Our church, whether you're a ministry partner or covenant partner, which basically means everybody, because we consider everyone who walks through the doors or participates in any activity we have a ministry partner. And ministry partners and covenant partners can nominate folks for deacon. Deacons have to be a covenant partner, and that just means you have chosen Cedar Bridge as your church home. And we always say, we choose you as soon as you walk in the door. But when you decide to choose us back, then you're a covenant partner. And anyone who is a covenant partner can be a deacon. And in our newsletter, we have a long list of all our covenant partners for you to look at, pray over, think about, talk to the person you're thinking about nominating, make sure that they agreed to be nominated, and then you can nominate them. And that will go until the end of April. And at the end of April, we will have deacon elections posted in the newsletter it'll be an email to the covenant partners at the beginning of May. For the first 14 days of May, we'll have deacon elections. And then our new deacons will be installed at the beginning of June. Another kind of ongoing thing, if you're graduating this year, whether that be from high school or college or some kind of graduate program, we want to celebrate you. And we're having a graduation Sunday on May 17th. So if that is you or one of your children, please let us know if you would like to participate. This week, we kind of got a lot going on. We've got a softball game. Sorry, I didn't get the schedule until after the newsletter went out, but softball season starts. We've had our preseason tournament, and the team will have their first game in the regular season tomorrow night at 7:30 at Boyd Lee. They're going to play Monday night and Wednesday night this week, both games at 7:30. Tuesday, our young adult small group is meeting at 6 p.m. here. We do not have midweek this week. We're going to start a 2-week series the following week. So we're still in a little break after Lent. So no midweek this week. Go to the softball game instead. And then we'll have midweek picking back up next week. We also have book club for our group called All Chapters Welcome. They've been reading The Correspondent, and that's going to be at the Dwyer's house on Friday night at 6 p.m. Next Sunday, we've got Rooted and Youth Before Church. And if you came in on the children's hall, you probably noticed a table with a lot of books and a cart full of stuff. That stuff we're not taking with us to Hooker. So if you would like to browse, there's a whole bunch of books. A lot of them have been studies that Amy has led in the past. We just have extra copies. If you want to go browse and see if there's anything you want, take it home. We're not taking it with us, so please take it home, or we're going to find a home for it somewhere else. There's a couple other things like some T-shirts and some games and stuff that we've just come across as we've been packing up and moving. Also, after church, as we've been cleaning up and packing, we have come across some trash, like big things that need to be hauled off to the dump. Like if you remember the big plane that was in the middle of the sanctuary or in here during VBS, the big orange plane, that's got to go to the dump. Or if someone wants to take it home with them, I hope you have a big house because it's a really big plane. But it's got to go, and then there's just some cardboard and things that need to be hauled off. No, Jonah, you cannot. I saw that. Also, be sure to check the Lost and Found as we're moving. There's a lot of stuff in the Lost and Found. It's under the table as you enter the door. There's lots of coffee cups and water bottles and other drink vessels that we need to send back home to wherever they belong. We are moving in 3 weeks, y'all, so that's really exciting. Please make plans to stay after church on May 3rd. We have moved most of the stuff already to Hooker, but there are some things we just need every Sunday. So after church on May 3rd, we're going to have our last service, and then we're going to pack up things like mics and the worship stuff and the kids, the seedlings things, and possibly Amy's books, because we might not get them all before then. She said there's just a lot. Whatever's left, we're going to take over to Hooker and just unload it there, and then the teams will be in charge of putting that out that week before we move. And so our first Sunday will be May the 10th, which is Mother's Day. So make plans to attend. I think that's all, so let's get started.
Good morning, Cedar Bridge. Please stand and sing with us as you're able. We're going to try on some oldie but goldie hymns this morning. Christ the Lord is risen today. Hallelujah. Earth and heaven in chorus say, Hallelujah. Raise your joys and triumphs high. Hallelujah. Sing ye heavens and earth reply. Hallelujah. Lives again our glorious King. Hallelujah. Where, O death, is now thy sting? Hallelujah. Once he died our souls to save. Hallelujah. Where's thy victory, boasting grave? Hallelujah. Love's redeeming work is done. Hallelujah. Fought the fight, the battle won. Hallelujah. Death in vain forbids him rise. Hallelujah. Christ has opened paradise. Hallelujah. Soar we now where Christ has led. Hallelujah. Following our exalted head. Hallelujah. Made like him we rise. Hallelujah. Ours the cross, the grave, the skies. Hallelujah.
This call to worship. We gather today in the light of resurrection, not because everything in our lives is easy, not because all fear has vanished, but because Christ is alive and present with us. We come with our locked doors, the places where fear lingers, where grief is still tender, where hope feels uncertain. And still, Christ stands among us and says, "Peace be with you," a peace that makes us whole, a peace that does not wait for perfection, a peace that meets us exactly where we are. So come, bring your whole selves into this space. Come ready to receive joy that cannot be contained. Come ready to laugh, to breathe, to be made new. Let us worship the God who meets us behind locked doors and calls us into life.
Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed, wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depth of happy rest, loving Father, Christ our brother, let your light upon us shine. Teach us how to love each other, lift us to the joy divine. Mortals join the mighty chorus, which the morning stars began. God's own love is reigning o'er us, joining people hand in hand. Ever singing, march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music leads us sunward in the triumph song of life. You may be seated.
All right, friends, as our youngest seedlings are heading out, I want to invite the little bit older kids up here for a second. I don't know what expresses joyful, joyful, we adore thee better than joyful children. That's just my opinion, but I tell you, it's beautiful. Hey, friends, how are y'all? Oh, no, you're good. All right. You know what? Today is the Sunday after Easter. And do you know that long ago, ancient Christians, early believers, called this Holy Humor Sunday? Do you know why they did that? Think. God played a big joke on death, and we celebrated it last week. What happened? Who's not in the grave anymore? Yell it out. Yes, Jesus is not in the grave anymore. And so early believers would celebrate that fact that God played a real big joke on death because death did not win. Death did not keep Jesus in the grave. And so they called this Holy Humor or Laughter Sunday. And sometimes people would really mess things up, like maybe the music leaders would give the sermon. There's an idea. Or the preacher would sing. Not a good idea. Or they'd do the whole service backwards, like start with the end and end up with the beginning. But I thought it's fun to laugh. Don't you like to laugh? I do. All right, I've got some jokes for you, okay? We're going to see if you think these are any good. All right? What do birds give out on Halloween? Tweets. They're not impressed. Why are teddy bears never hungry? They're always stuffed, yes. Why do ducks have tail feathers? To cover their butt quacks. That's exactly it. Okay, the adults like these. The kids are looking at me like, this is lame, Pastor Amy. What do you call a dog magician? This is my favorite. A labracadabrador. Okay, this is the last one. Can a kangaroo jump higher than the Empire State Building? Yes! The Empire State Building cannot jump. So yes, a kangaroo can jump higher than the Empire State Building. You can jump higher than the Empire State Building. They're not impressed at all. What I want you to remember, friends, is that Easter joy, resurrection joy, joy in general, is not to be contained and kept to ourselves. It is to explode and share with everybody around you. So things that bring you joy this week, that's going to be my challenge to you. To not just be like, oh, I love that, and keep it to yourself. but to share that joy with others. Because as we share our joy with others, it becomes contagious, right? It's something that we can't stop. Sometimes somebody else is laughing and we just laugh because they're laughing. But joy is contagious. So I want to encourage you as you go throughout your week and there's something that brings you joy, that you think about it and think, how can I share this with others? Because that's exactly what God calls us to do. All right, y'all go have a seat. Thank you for humoring me with my dad jokes for kids. I love a good punny joke, that is for sure. All right, friends, we are starting the 50 days of Easter. We celebrate Lent for 40 days, and we celebrate Easter for 50 days. The church calendar itself reminds us that we spend more time on the celebration of the resurrection of Christ than we do about preparing for Christ to go to the grave. So we are starting a new sermon series today that we're calling Alive in the World, because claiming the belief in the resurrection and claiming that means that we believe that God's Spirit is alive and moving and impacts the way that we live our daily lives. So does it impact how we spend our time, how we use our resources, how we think about our presence in the community? What does it mean to live a resurrected life every day? What does that look like? And I told the kids, today lots of churches will celebrate Holy Humor Sunday, and there's fun ways to do that. And the bottom line is this: God played the ultimate trick on death and got the biggest joke, so to speak, over on death, because death did not win. And I love that. I love, laughing. A good joke can just open us up to possibilities and laughter and that we may not have experienced before. One of my favorite theologians, Anne Lamott, she calls laughter, what does she call it? Carbonated holiness. So like, think about a big good soda and it just effervescent and flows and explodes if you shake it up and all that kind of stuff. Laughter is good for us. When we laugh, endorphins are released, and that's a good thing. Laughter helps stimulate our hearts, all of that. So Holy Humor Sunday, Holy Humor services, not only give Christians an opportunity to celebrate Jesus' resurrection, it gives each of us an opportunity to celebrate the smaller resurrections that we have in our lives every day. The smaller ways that we see new life happening, new beginnings happening. Because the bigger truth is that Easter joy was never meant to be contained to one Sunday. Never meant to be contained. Joy, laughter, the newness of resurrected life was always meant to be embodied by each of us and then shared with other people. Our passage today is John 20. We're going to look at 19 through the end of that chapter. When it was the evening on that day, the first day of the week, the doors were locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews. So this is, last week we talked about the morning of this day, the day that the women went to the tomb, found that the tomb was empty. This is that same evening. Jesus came and stood among them in the locked room and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the marks of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, the disciples were again in the house. This time, Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Okay, so it's the evening of the first Easter morning. The disciples have triple latched the door. They have shoved a dresser in front of it, and they are rehearsing their alibis on what they will say they were doing if the Romans come and get them. Fear makes interior decorators of us all, right? We rearrange everything sometimes to block out what we are scared of. So rather than being joy-filled, the disciples are fearfully hiding in this locked room. And as incredible as the resurrection was, they're still feeling, I think, the pain of what happened before. The tomb is empty, but the reality of resurrection wasn't yet clear to them. The disciples had locked themselves away. Fear had them trapped and hiding. Grief was weighing heavy, and hope of all that they'd experienced with Jesus was had sort of taken a back seat, was kind of like a distant memory, at least at this point. They're locked inside a room. In the locked room, friends, fear still wins. But then, without a key, without a combination lock, without a door code, without knocking, Jesus enters the space, just shows up. And the first thing that he said to them was not a rebuke, not a like, "Y'all locked me out? Seriously? You disappeared when I was being crucified and you locked me out of the room?" He didn't do any of that. He said, "Peace be with you." He gives them a blessing. In the middle of their fear, Jesus gives them a blessing. He says, "Peace be with you." The word peace comes from the Greek root eirene, and it means peace, peace of mind. It stems from the root areo, meaning to join or to come together as a whole. So the idea of peace that is more accurate with the original Greek is this idea of peace as being made whole. Not just the absence of conflict, but in the midst of whatever is happening, conflict or no, that there is a wholeness of strength that you feel and draw from. In street level Greek, it's like, relax is okay. Chill is okay. Jesus doesn't scold them at all, doesn't fuss at them for not believing the women who have already told them that Jesus is no longer in the grave. Jesus didn't critique them for being locked up behind a closed door and didn't ask them for a post-resurrection report. What have you done? Jesus just gives peace, acceptance, reminders of love and his presence well before the disciples, maybe in our minds, deserve it. Jesus shows up. Next, he rolls up his sleeves and he shows them the scars in his hands. Not to shame them, not to, "Come on, don't you believe it?" Not to shame them. "Why don't you believe it already? You should have known this was coming. You should have listened to me." Not at all. Not to shame them, but to share with them the full experience. The wounds that Jesus had were now healed. That this really happened. That Rome really killed me, but God didn't let death win. And then John tells us something beautiful in verse 20. He says this, "Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord." The Greek word that rejoiced comes from is kairo. It means inner delight or inner joy, a rejoicing that is not just an outward experience, but that really stems from within. Real, overwhelming unstoppable joy. They had joy. Not because their problems had dissolved overnight, not because everything was all of a sudden easy now that Jesus was there, but because Jesus was alive and was with them, they had joy. It's important to remember and think about and notice that the doors were still locked. The outside world was still dangerous. The futures of the disciples were still uncertain. Nothing about their circumstances had changed except inside the room where they were, everything had changed because Jesus was present with them. The presence of Jesus with them took them from this fear and sorrow place and locked up place and brought them peace and joy. I think this is what Easter joy looks like, friends. Not the absence of trouble. Everybody can be happy and joyous when there's nothing going wrong, right? But the presence of one who makes all things whole in the midst of any other circumstance, that's Easter joy. That's the presence of Christ. It's not a shallow happiness that depends on good circumstances, but a deep joy that really springs from the living Christ right here with us. And friends, I know it's hard because when we're in the thick of it and we're in the middle of a struggle, more than anything we want is for the circumstance to be different. We want the bad thing to not be our experience any longer. But we can remember that we have the presence of Christ with us when we've locked ourselves in a room and have double, triple, quadruple latched the door. Christ's presence is with us even when we're in the locked room, when we're scared and when we don't know what to do. So Jesus continues talking to the disciples, and it gets a little more difficult because Jesus says this, verse 21, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." Peace and joy are not just comforts for us to just have and cradle and hide and pack up in a box and put in the top shelf of our closet where we forget things. They're realities for us to live out. They're witnesses for us to embody and share. Jesus brings peace and joy, but it's also a calling to each one of us to live differently. As the Father sent me, so I send you. So then there's Thomas, who missed it the first time. He was not there. He hears the news later on from the disciples, and he struggles like many of us would if we had not seen that ourselves. And he says, unless I see this, unless I touch this, I'm not going to believe. So here's my question for us to think about. What happens when resurrection joy stays locked in a room? What happens when resurrection joy stays locked inside a room? The disciples experienced peace and joy from Jesus. We're told, as the Father sent me, so I'm sending you. It is possible to receive peace internally, but still live externally as if fear is still in charge. Verse 26 tells us, a week later, his disciples were again in the house and Thomas was with them. A whole week. And they're still in the room with the door shut. Still, or maybe again. I can't help but wonder, what was that week like? What was that week like? In that week, did any of the disciples who saw Jesus in the room before do or say or live in any different way than they were before? Did that or would that have made any difference for someone like Thomas? I'm not saying that it is our job to make other people believe something at all, or that it is our fault if we share our resurrection joy with others and they do absolutely nothing about it or with it. Hear me clearly. Much spiritual abuse has stemmed from what I think is a false teaching that you are responsible for the actions and belief of others. That's just not true. But in the with the same weight, each of us gets to make the decision for our own spiritual life on our own. We make our best decisions. But I absolutely do believe, friends, that the way we live absolutely impacts the world around us and how they see God if we claim to follow him. The things we say and do on social media, the ways we talk to each other, it all carries weight. It all has the potential to make an impact, positive or negative, in the lives of others. And we see this, right? There are people that we absolutely love to be around because their energy, their outlook, their vibe is complete joy. And it is catching. We feel better. We're more at peace. We want to be around people like this. In that week, what did the disciples actually show Thomas? Did they embody peace? Did they radiate joy? Or did they still live and look like people who hid behind locked doors? Imagine with me, what if the disciples had thrown open the doors? They told Thomas this is what happened, and they'd thrown open those doors, and they're laughing, rejoicing, they're transformed. Their fear is replaced with visible peace. Would Thomas still have said, unless I see it for myself? Maybe so, absolutely. Or may Thomas have said, something has changed with y'all. Something is different. Tell me more about this experience. Resurrection is not something that we only proclaim, friends. It is something that we demonstrate with our lives. And no, what others do with that is not our responsibility, but it is our job, our work to do, to get out of the locked room and walk into the world being fully alive. As I have been sent by the Father, now I am sending you. That was spoken directly to the disciples, but it impacts us as well. Being and believing in the resurrection can and absolutely should transform not only how we view the world, but how we live in the world. We should become people who others see new life in some way, shape, or fashion. Look again in verse 21. When Jesus says this to them, to the disciples, Jesus said to them, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I sent you." When he said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they're forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." Jesus is telling his disciples they directly impact how other people view God. If the disciples who were known to walk around and be and follow Jesus, the disciples, the ones Jesus had sent out to do his work even when Jesus was still here, Jesus tells them, if you forgive others, they're forgiven. If you don't forgive others, they aren't forgiven. Jesus is not saying the disciples choose who to forgive or not to forgive. Jesus absolutely took care of all of that on the cross. But Jesus is telling them, you continue my work in the world. You represent me now. The way you live and treat other people has a direct impact on them. So you live in a way that either frees people or that keeps them tied up in shame. The way we treat other people impacts the way they see God treating the world. When people come to you and what we say and what we do makes a difference in how people see God. If we say, Christ is risen, and then we're cussing out everyone who blows their horn at us on the road, that one hits deep because I have some guilty. We say Christ is risen, but we are angry and anxious and closed off and fear-driven. Then our witness, it becomes harder to believe. And therefore, God becomes harder to believe. Sometimes people don't struggle to believe in Jesus. They struggle to see Jesus in us and make that connection. Yeah. It's not a call to live perfectly. I want to get that through our minds. It is not if I have a bad day and I cuss somebody out at a stoplight, that I've ruined my witness forever. That's not the way it is. But it is a reminder to remember that we're an extension of Jesus into the world. When Jesus says, I've been sent and now I'm sending you, Jesus is telling them, okay, you're picking up where I left off. Tag. You're it. If we call ourselves Christians and live in a way that looks like we aren't even attempting to imitate Christ, that is sending a mixed message to our world. And mixed messages are confusing. And mixed messages are harmful. We see this in our public political world right now. Why would others believe God is good when those who claim to follow Jesus and have political power are taking advantage of positions, protecting not the vulnerable and the orphans and the widows and the immigrants that we're commanded to protect, but their own selves? It is hard to look and see when people are saying, yes, I love God, but not treating anyone in their life like God seems to want to in the whole Bible. It's hard to say, I want to follow a God like that. It's a mixed message. It's a confusing message. We can't ignore that the way that we live lives impact those around us. And sometimes we have to be louder because the bigger message that's coming from other places may not be a healthy one. So there's good news for Thomas in this message. No matter what the week with the disciples looked like, Jesus comes back again. Jesus comes right back in that room the same week. He returns not with anger. He didn't go to the disciples and be like, y'all, it's been a week. You are still sitting in this locked room. What the heck? He did not do that. He goes straight to Thomas and invites Thomas to touch his hands, put his hands in his side. Jesus gives Thomas exactly what Thomas needs. Jesus wants Thomas to have the experience that he needs to believe. And when Thomas finally encounters Jesus and does that, he just doesn't give a verbal, oh, okay, I get it. He worships my Lord, my God. Thomas's experience is personal and is intimate. It's the joy of finding out that even our doubts don't keep Jesus away from us. Even when we miss the moment, we didn't show up, we overslept, whatever, Jesus comes back for us too. There's an important balance, I think, that we need to recognize, because God's grace, God's activity, God's action is not dependent on our perfect witness or our perfect action at all. That weight is not on our shoulders. And the way we live, our witness and our actions absolutely makes a difference. We get to open the doors to the locked rooms, friends. We get to throw open the door and let the light in. We get to practice joy. Practicing joy is absolutely a form of resistance. Absolutely. Sojourner Truth, I love reading her writing. She was formerly a slave and then became a civil rights advocate. And she says this about joy, sort of. I will not allow the light of my life to be determined by the darkness around me. I'm not going to let the darkness around me impact me. She chose joy as a way to resist, as a way to stand against what was happening in her world. We get to experience and receive the peace of Christ that brings wholeness. And we get to not keep it contained and not keep it enclosed into a locked door, but to live it out loud, to be intentional, to embody resurrection in our everyday lives. And you are doing this, friends. Every time you are kind to someone who has not been kind to you, you are embodying the resurrection. Every time you take a moment that you don't have to do an act of compassion, to have empathy for another person, you are living or alive in this world and living out the resurrection. Every time you give something to someone who needs it or do something for a family member who needs it, we are living out the resurrection. Every time you sign a petition or show up at a march or do anything like that, we are living out the resurrection. I see it happening all over your lives. Embodying a new resurrection life is our work for our everyday lives. So friends, let us be a church where joy is a form of resistance. That we stand together with joy and live louder. Live louder than those who try to live a life that doesn't look like Jesus at all and claim it Christian. Let us be people who have peace that can be seen in our lives and felt by others, that can be experienced by others in our life. Let us be people who pause before we respond or react and say a kind word instead of the sharp thing that wants to come out right at the beginning. That's living the resurrection. Let us live resurrection in such a way, friends, that the possibility of belief becomes a reality for someone else. Amen, friends. May it be so. All right, friends, if you are familiar with Cedar Bridge, we like to have a time of response at the end of each teaching time, at the end of each worship service. And we have our praise team will come back up here and will lead us in singing. You can stand and sing or sit where you are and listen. We have communion set up on both sides of the worship room and gluten-free bread on this side. And if you would like to take a piece of the bread and dip it into the cup and remember that we are to live alive in this world because of Jesus, if that's meaningful for you, that is an opportunity for you as well. We have our prayer requests basket at the back of the worship room, and every request that we get comes in, goes to our prayer team. They pray regularly for that and together once a month. We also have our offering basket at the back. If giving is a part of your worship, we are honored to receive that. So we have created this time for you, so respond as you feel led, friends.
Please stand as you're able and sing. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Naught be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day and by night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom and thou my true word. I ever with thee and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, I thy dear child. Thou in me dwelling, with thee reconciled. Riches I heed not, nor vain empty praise. Thou mine inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only first in my heart. High King of heaven, my treasure thou art. is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today, a bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine and 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Go now from this place, not as people who keep resurrection locked inside, but as people who live alive in the world. Carry with you the peace of Christ, a peace that makes you whole, even when the world is not. Live with a joy that resists fear, a joy that refuses to be silenced, a joy that others can see and feel. And as you go, may others catch glimpses of Christ in you, in your kindness, your courage, and your compassion. Trust that Christ still shows up, still speaks peace, still invites belief. Go in peace, go in joy, go and live alive in the world.